Equatorial Guinea and Madagascar. According to Counting Women In, women are dramatically underrepresented at all levels of politics, and as a result, we've tumbled to 65th in the global league table of female representation. Now, why are we going backwards, and is the same thing happening in other industries? Well, joining me now to talk about that, Nan Sloan. Now, she's from the Centre for Women and Democracy, who co-authored this report. Elizabeth Varley, she's CEO and founder of Tech Hub, and Marina Ironside, who's chair of Women on Boards. So, Nan, I'm going to start off with you. Thanks so much for joining us today. How on earth could we be going backwards?
Well, we're going backwards in the international league tables. We're not going backwards in terms of absolute numbers of women in politics, but our problem is that everybody else, certainly in Western Europe and comparable countries, and not just Madagascar and other countries, are going faster than we are. So we think we're doing quite well. We're actually doing quite badly.
Why is that? Why do you think that is?
I think it's partly because we don't consider it important enough. And although there's a lot of rhetoric around we need more women in politics, people are reluctant to do the things that we know work to make it happen. And I think it is partly because we tend to think we are the mother of parliament, so we must be getting it right. We must be ahead of the game. And actually, we're certainly ahead of the United States, but we're not ahead of a lot else.
I mean, just looking at the ranking, we're ranked 65th in the league compared to other countries who were 33rd in 2001. Why has this happened? Were you surprised by this?
No, because the rate of progress in this country is so slow. At each general election, which occurs every 4 and now 5 years, we only go up by 1%, 2%, whereas Italy at their last election had a 10% jump, which took them from 22%, which is the same as us, to 32% now. So it's not necessarily... We're just not making progress fast enough.
I mean, Marina, is this happening in the cities? The same sort of thing going on with women not progressing as much as we should do?
I think the problems behind women in politics are very similar to the historical issues. Women were excluded from so much of the economy, from the workforce, and it's recovering from those historical lapses. What surprises me is how few organisations actually look at who's making it to the top and understand that even if they're taking in 50% women at the low levels, there's only 3% at the top. So we're very keen that organisations actually get to know their data. And then if they do identify problems, they set themselves targets.
Now, okay, targets, we're talking quotas here, because in theory, it can sound like a very good thing to meet those quotas to deal with this issue, but you do get men and women saying actually maybe quotas and meeting these targets isn't necessarily the answer.
Well, quotas is a very emotive term, and it immediately gets people thinking about people getting there without merit, becoming tokens. But really, if you look at how organisations of all types work, people have targets for everything. They have targets for revenue, they have targets for customer satisfaction. And if you want a busy middle manager or a head of a local political organisation to focus on gender diversity, you probably better be telling him that it's important.
Elizabeth, tell me, the world of tech, this modern world of technology, surely things are looking good for women there?
We've traditionally seen fewer women in technology and sciences and engineering. It is improving, but we still need more. It's become a real economic issue because we need more talented engineers and programmers, and if women aren't going into those careers, then we're really missing out as companies.
Well, this is something I was going to ask actually everyone here. Should we be having conversations with women a lot early on in terms of the choices they should be making, where they could actually enter into to work?
Absolutely. I think this is actually about gender generally and not about women specifically. The same reasons that there are fewer women in science and technology and in upper echelons of business and in politics are the same reasons that we see fewer stay-home fathers, fewer male nurses, fewer male secretarial staff. If people are being told that the choices for their lives and happiness are in some way connected to their sex or their gender presentation, then we have a problem, and we need to go back to very, very early age, non-gendered toys, non-gendered clothes, and really start communicating that your choices about what make you happy are what you should be following.
Is that the way to tackle this, Dan, do you think?
It's certainly one of the ways, and certainly in terms of women and power, and particularly political power, girls learn very young that they are more powerless than boys, should we say, and they don't see role models in the political sphere. They see very few women political leaders, they see very few women in the key political roles. They're even less likely to see women leading their local authority, because that's the poorest level of women's representation is actually at the local level, which is not what you would think. So I think that is certainly one of the answers. It's true that quotas is a very emotive term, and I prefer to think about positive action, because there are more forms of positive action than just quotas. Quotas are very effective but also a very blunt instrument for solving the problem, and useful as a last resort. But at the point at which you're using quotas, you're admitting failure with everything else.
I mean, going back to politics, then David Cameron recently tried to hit those targets in his recent reshuffle, and he didn't get as much accolade for it as much as you'd anticipate he might get for trying to bring more women onto the cabinet.
I think partly because he's taken so long to do it. I think if you make a pledge at the beginning of your administration to do something, you probably had better get it done fairly quickly if people are not going to spend the next 4 years saying, why haven't you done this, why haven't you done this?
So he's damned if he doesn't, damned if he does it, just takes a long time doing it. Is that right? Or are we still going to criticise people for taking too long to make those movements?
I think that it's great that the pressure was there for something to be done. I think it's natural people looked at it a little bit cynically given the timing in the election cycle, but all progress is worth.
Well, let's look at maybe the issues concerning the pay of women as well. I mean, cities are a place where there's lots of revenue, lots of money to be made. I mean, is there still that pay divide as well?
Yes, absolutely. The research does show that there still is quite a significant difference between what men and women get, both in terms of take-home pay and also in terms of bonuses.
Why do you think that is?
Again, part of it is still historic, and you need to work through that pressure. There is research that shows women maybe aren't as aggressive when it comes to asking for a higher pay rise, asking for a bigger bonus, and even in Sheryl Sandberg's wonderful book, Lean In, she talks about her personal experience of having to be forced by her brother to actually say, I want more than that. So there are all sorts of dynamics.
This is it. I mean, Sheryl Sandberg, obviously working in technology there as the second in command at Facebook, and she also came under criticism for saying that it could be our fault for not being aggressive enough, for not leaning in, as she refers to it. I mean, would you say that's fair enough, particularly working in the tech industry as well?
I think there are a variety of issues and a variety of challenges, and some of these are individual issues around personality or comfort, but a lot of those things are to do with socialization, which is the conversation that we've been having already, is if you aren't taught to go for the things that you want, or taught that you have less power, then it can be challenging to break through that. So I think it's about encouraging all people to be able to focus on achieving the things that they want, regardless of their gender or other issues.
I mean, if you look at the statistics, you do say it could be a culture thing, it's something girls have to learn from a young age and at home. But when women do enter the professions after graduating, they're equal with men, and it's when they're progressing, trying to get to those top jobs, and that's where it kind of peters out. And that's because women, we have children. We want to sometimes leave, and we want to raise those children, and there's nothing that can be done about that.
I think there's a difference between women who make a conscious, definite choice, which is about their career as well as about their domestic and private lives, and women who feel they are forced out of their professions because there is no childcare, there is very expensive childcare, because society is judgmental about the choices that they make, because women tend to earn less than men. If one partner's going to give up work, it's usually the female half of that partnership. There are certainly professions where actually at entry level there are more women than men going in, and the law is one, and far fewer women coming out at the other end in the case of the law, senior judges and at that kind of a level. And the dropout rate is enormous, and that's not just down to women are more likely to go and often have babies. That's down to a complex range of factors, some of which are certainly to do with socialisation, but some of which are to do with the way in which we regard both careers and parenthood in this country.
Would you agree with that, Marina?
Yes, and I think the research done quite recently by the 30% Club showed that a man was 10 times more likely to be promoted to partner, and quite a bit of it was was about promotion decisions. And again, there are subtle stereotyping and unconscious bias issues that come into play there. And it's only when the law firms looked at the numbers and started to see that they realised it's not just about the women deciding to go off and have babies and do other things.
Yeah. What about you, Elizabeth, do you think?
Yeah, this goes back to looking at childcare as a women's issue. It's not a women's issue, it's a social issue. What about same-sex partners who are male? They still need to make a decision about childcare, and I think it's about looking at things like family life and childcare and child rearing as important and valuable. And so childcare issues shouldn't be tied to issues for women, they should be tied to issues for our society. If you're losing talented people from any industry or any role because they would choose to stay in their career but can't because of childcare issues, then that's a big problem.
I mean, do you have children?
No.
And is this something you've ever thought about, the fact you are going to have children? How are you going to do that and run your very successful and very big company, Tech Hub?
I talk to a lot of women in the industry who have children and ask them how they did it. And often I've seen, and this is obviously my personal experience and anecdotes, that they've often had children once they've achieved a certain amount of success, because that has made it easier for them financially to get more help to continue their careers. I've also seen people, though, who've really made their own choices. One woman I know who's an investor and very successful, she brings her children on trips. She expects that if she needs to have someone bring her child for breastfeeding or something in the office, then that's just what happens. And I think we need a greater acceptance of things like that.
Okay, well listen, Elizabeth, Marina and Nan, thank you so much for joining us today at this lunchtime, and let us know what you think and your thoughts